Good morning. This is John from the Springs Mennonite Church. And here it is, the last day of the week. I've been talking about Isaiah chapter 41. And today I want to finish this little series I've been doing by looking at verses 19 and 20. But let me regress just a bit. Isaiah 41 has talked about what God's going to do. He's going to give water. Water is a symbol of life. It's not just water, though it is that. He's going to give life. He's going to have rivers where there aren't rivers. He's going to have them in deserts where there aren't any. He's going to have pools of water. He's going to do all kinds of things. And then he says, to finish this little section up, in verse 18 and so forth, I will plant trees in the barren desert. Cedar, acacia, myrtle, olive, cypress, fir, and pine. Well, let's stop a minute. If any of you have ever tried to plant something, if it doesn't have water, it's not going to live. And if you try to plant something in the desert, man, that's going to be tough because the desert is so dry. Even when you get a little water, it just disappears, gets absorbed into the atmosphere. Hardly ever gets down deep enough to where the roots are. But God says here, I'm going to do this. I'm going to plant these trees. And then he says, and I'm doing this so all who see this miracle will understand what it means. That is the Lord who has done this and the Holy One who created it. Isaiah says, God says, I'm going to work a miracle. And he picks, well, given the terrain and the location of where Isaiah was speaking, talking about the desert and needing water, he speaks this word in a place where people would understand. Now, where I live, there seems to be plenty of water, plenty of things growing, and we just haven't had a drought. Now, there a couple of times in the last few years it's been a little dry, but nothing like some places, particularly out in the West, that have had. And so he picks a place where he talks about planting and the need for water in a desolate land. And everybody who heard him would have understood it. There would have been no question what this means. It means that somebody, some power, something was going to work a miracle. You can't do it by chance. You just can't. And when your life suddenly happens other than expected, that's not by chance. It's not a coincidence, either good or bad. There's a hand behind all that happens in this world, and that hand belongs to God. Now, before we go any further, let me say, I don't understand why so much bad things happen, other than the fact we live in a sinful world, and in a sinful world, bad things happen. This is not an attempt to explain that. But it is an attempt to explain who's in charge. And I'd like to stop a second and turn a corner here and ask the question, who's in charge of your life? Who's really running the shots? Now, for a lot of us guys, people will laugh and say it's the wife. And we chuckle because we guys know that the wife is not going to dictate to us, except, of course, what she does. And most of us pay attention. There are a few who ignore that, but to ignore your wife and her feelings is to be on very unsettled ground. And I bet you most of the people I'm talking to today understand that. So God says here, I'm going to do all this. And I'm going to do this so all who see it will understand what's going on. So, what's going on? He finishes up by saying, and this is for all who see the miracle to understand that it is I, the Lord, who have done it. When things happen we can't explain, who do we give credit to or who do we blame? Well, if it's a bad thing, some of us say, well, yeah, beep, 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 kind of a thing. But God does good things. His intention is to draw our attention towards Him. And when something wonderful happens, He wants us to understand that He did it. And He did it because He cares about you. That's it. There's no other explanation. But we often add an extra explanation. See, God wants us to go through life looking for miracles. The planting of a tree in the desert is one thing. To plant all of these trees, what does he say here? Cedar, acacia, myrtle, olive, cypress, fir, and pine. To plant all of those is not something that's just suddenly going to happen. When we start looking for God in the small things, we see God in the big things. And the more we see God, the more we're able to see more of God. And the more we see of God, the more we're able to understand there is a God who cares and is directing the show. There is a God who has a plan for my life and your life and everybody else's. See how this works? God is a good God. Psalm 41 of Isaiah shares that all the time, again and again and again. And these are just some of the examples that he talks about. So I hope you've listened this week. I hope you've had a chance to try to open your eyes and see God at work. And if you haven't, okay, well, try it next week. God's got plenty of time to wait for you. And we got plenty of time to do all that he wants us to do. Well, thank you so much for listening this week. I really pray for your blessings and your joy in your life. If you have a need or a concern, let us know. We'll do whatever we can as fast as we can to help meet your need. Thanks for listening. I'll be back on Monday and I'll start another sharing time. Take care.